The slap came before the soup even hit the table. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't rage. It was worse. Routine. The bowl rattled, broth spilling across the wood. My hand trembled around the spoon, but I didn't move. The sting bloomed across my cheek, hot and sharp, and the air smelled faintly of chicken stock and iron. He stood above me, my son, my only son, his shadow long and cold in the kitchen light. "Too bland," he said flatly. His voice had that calm cruelty I'd learned to recognize, the kind that didn't come from anger, but from ownership. "Tomorrow my wife's coming for lunch. Don't embarrass me again. Cover this up. Smile." Then he turned and left. Just like that. No glance back, no shame. The door shut, and the sound lingered longer than it should have. I sat there, tasting salt, not from the soup, but from the blood on my lip. The spoon in my hand shook once, twice, then stilled. My reflection in the metal was barely visible, just the curve of a mouth that used to smile more often than it spoke. He had my eyes once. Now I barely recognized them in his face. For a long time, I just listened. The ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint echo of his car engine fading down the road. Each sound a reminder that I was still here, breathing, existing, enduring. That word, enduring, had become my way of life. The kitchen window showed the night sky, faintly orange from the streetlight outside. A moth beat against the glass. I watched it, dazed, wings frantic, searching for escape. I envied it. He used to sit right there, in that same chair, swinging his legs, while I fed him spoonfuls of soup too hot for his mouth. He'd giggle, ask for more salt, and I'd laugh because he was too small to know how little we had. We built this house together, brick by brick, meal by meal, year by year. I scrubbed his school shirts until my knuckles bled, worked 2 jobs so he could have shoes that didn't squeak. Every bruise, every ache, I told myself was worth it, because love endures. But love can rot. And mine had been rotting quietly for years. He mistook my silence for obedience, my patience for permission, my care for servitude, and I let him, until tonight. The slap wasn't new, the humiliation wasn't new, but something inside me, something finally cracked. It wasn't the pain, it was the way he looked at me, like I was furniture that had outlived its use. I reached for a napkin, dabbed the blood from my lip, and smiled to no one. A small, precise smile, the kind that hides 1,000 thoughts. If he wanted a performance tomorrow, he'd get one, but not the one he planned. I stood, straightened the tablecloth, wiped the soup from the wood, every movement careful, deliberate. I wasn't trembling anymore. Outside, rain started. Slow at first, then steady. It hit the roof like soft applause. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "we'll see who smiles." And in that moment, between the ticking of the clock and the sound of rain, the mother he knew began to die, and someone else began to take her place. There was a time when he laughed like sunlight, when his cheeks still carried the softness of childhood, and his hands reached for mine, not out of power, but out of safety. He used to call me Amma, in that sing-song way children use when the world still feels kind. And every time he said it, the weight of life seemed bearable. We lived in a 2-room house at the edge of the city, cracked walls, leaky roof, a single fan that groaned through summer nights. But to him, it was a palace. He'd race through the narrow hallway, his small feet slapping the cement, shouting about dragons or treasure maps made from torn newspapers. And I'd laugh, always laugh, because in those moments, the world outside didn't matter. I remember one night. He couldn't have been more than 6. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the power went out. The darkness scared him, and he crawled into my lap, clutching my sari. "Don't worry," I whispered, stroking his hair. "The lights always come back." He looked up at me with those wide eyes. "And if they don't?" "Then we make our own," I said, lighting a candle between us. He smiled. That candlelight painted gold on his cheeks. I can still see it when I close my eyes. He was kind once, gentle, the sort of boy who rescued stray kittens and gave his only candy to children who had none. If someone told me then what he would become, I would have laughed. No mother believes the monster could ever wear her child's face, but monsters don't appear overnight. They grow slowly, quietly, watered by ego and fed by neglect. His father left when he was 12, left us both without a word. I remember standing at the doorway with our son beside me, the taillights of that old car disappearing into fog. My boy didn't cry. He just watched, jaw clenched, hands tight at his sides. Something inside him changed that day, something I didn't see clearly until it was too late. He became serious, ambitious. He stopped asking for bedtime stories. He started asking how much things cost. By 17, he had a job in the city. By 20, he had money. And with money came distance, expensive shirts, sharp words, and a voice that grew colder with every success. He'd come home sometimes, brief visits filled with half smiles and impatience. He'd talk about efficiency, discipline, and how emotions make people weak. I'd make him tea, try to remind him to eat slowly, to rest, to breathe. He'd scroll his phone instead, nodding absently, eyes already somewhere else. Then came the promotion, then the marriage. And somewhere between those milestones, my son disappeared completely. His wife was polite, careful, always watching, always measuring. A woman made for appearances. He adored her the way men adore trophies, with pride, not love. When she visited, he spoke to me only in commands. "Clean this. Serve that. Don't talk too much." The first time he raised his voice at me, I told myself he was tired. The second time, I told myself he didn't mean it. The third time, I told myself it was my fault. That's how mothers lie to themselves. Not out of stupidity, but out of hope. Hope that the boy who once kissed your cheek goodnight still lives somewhere inside the man who now looks at you like you're in the way. But last night, that slap, it shattered that illusion for good. It wasn't anger anymore. It was contempt. Cold. Practiced. Certain. And now, as I stand in the same kitchen, where he once learned to walk, I can still hear the echo of his first laugh blending with the echo of his last insult. It's strange how those sounds overlap. Innocence and cruelty, both born from the same throat. He will never understand what he took from me, but he will soon understand what I can take from him. Because a mother remembers everything, every weakness, every fear, and he has given me a lifetime's worth of both. The morning after the slap, the world was too quiet. Even the sparrows that usually quarreled on the balcony railing seemed to hold their breath. The sunlight crawled across the kitchen floor, warm, golden, a cruel contrast to the bruises it revealed. I stared at them in the mirror, the faint purple bloom beneath my eye. The corner of my lip cracked. For a long time, I didn't move. I just watched. Watched the reflection of a woman who had loved too long, obeyed too quietly, and waited too patiently. He had left early, his polished shoes tapping down the hallway, his voice shouting orders into the phone as he disappeared into the day. The door clicked shut. Silence again. Real silence, the kind that feels alive, waiting to see what you'll do next. I brewed tea, though I couldn't taste it. I sat at the table, the one he'd slammed his hand on just hours before, and began to think. People think revenge is born in rage. It isn't. Rage burns fast and leaves ash. Revenge is born in clarity. It grows in the quiet after the storm, when your hands stop shaking and your heart starts counting. I took out an old notebook from the drawer, the one I used to jot down recipes when he was little. The pages smelled faintly of turmeric and smoke, and there, between smudged ink and oil stains, I began writing. Not words of forgiveness, not prayers, a list, his schedule, his boss's address, the drawer where he keeps his files, the passcode on his phone, the spare key to his office. Each line was a thread in a net he would never see coming. He believed I was blind. He never understood that years of motherhood make you an expert observer. You learn to notice when someone's lying before they even open their mouth. That evening, when he came home, I was already playing the part he expected. Quiet, obedient, small. He scrolled through his phone, grunted something about work, and demanded dinner. I served it. He didn't notice the way I moved slower, the way my eyes never left him as he ate. Predators never look for danger at their own table. Over the next week, I collected everything I needed. The evidence was already there. I just had to let it breathe. The first came easily. His cruelty had a rhythm. Every insult, every slap followed a pattern, and patterns can be documented. I hid a small recorder behind the spice rack, another near the dining table. I didn't have to wait long. By the third night, his voice was already on tape, calling me useless, threatening to send me back to the village if I didn't behave. His laughter followed, low and sharp, like metal scraping against metal. Then came the photographs. A bruise on my arm, the red mark on my cheek. Taken quietly in the bathroom mirror, with the phone he thought I didn't know how to use. Each image was a seed, proof waiting to grow. But the final step was delicate. It required timing, precision, and courage. His boss, Mr. Kapoor, was a man of impeccable reputation. Strict, respected, a man who believed integrity was currency. And my son worshipped him. He'd talk about him endlessly, quoting his advice, repeating his words as though they were scripture. "If Mr. Kapoor sees you as family," he once said, "you've made it." I smiled at that memory. Yes, I thought. Family. So I wrote the letter, not dramatic, not emotional, just the truth, stripped bare. "Sir, you once said that no man should raise his hand against the defenseless. The man you trust, the one who calls you mentor, has broken that rule again and again. I send you this, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity, because silence protects monsters. A mother." I printed the photographs, slipped in the audio file on a small USB drive, and sealed it all in a plain envelope with his company's letterhead, something I took from my son's briefcase while he slept. On Friday morning, I followed him as he left for work. He didn't see me. He never looked back anymore. I took the bus, the same one that rattled through the industrial district, and when he entered his office building, I waited 5 minutes, then walked in through the side door. Security guards didn't question me. An old woman carrying lunch bags never looks suspicious. In the elevator, my hands didn't shake. They should have, but they didn't. I left the envelope at the front desk, addressed to Mr. Kapoor. Confidential. And then, as the elevator doors closed behind me, I exhaled for the first time in days. When I returned home, I made lunch. Not for him, for myself. It was simple. Rice, lentils, pickled mango. But when I tasted it, It was the first meal in months that didn't taste like defeat. He came home that night later than usual. His voice was quieter. He didn't look at me when he ate, and when I asked if something was wrong, he said nothing, just stared at his plate, chewing slowly, like a man who'd bitten into poison and was trying to pretend it was fine. I smiled softly. The war had begun. He didn't come home the next night. The clock struck midnight, then 1, and still there was no sound of his keys, no echo of his angry footsteps. For years, I used to wait for those footsteps with dread, knowing they brought storms, commands, and the smell of whiskey and disappointment. But that night, I waited with something new, stillness, because I already knew what had happened. At exactly 10 a.m. that morning, his world had been peeled open. At the office, the day began like any other. The buzz of printers, the soft hum of air conditioning, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. He entered with his usual swagger, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. He greeted everyone like a king among clerks, all smiles and confidence, that self-satisfied grin of a man who believes he is untouchable. Then he walked into Mr. Kapoor's office. The envelope was waiting on the desk, right where he couldn't miss it. He noticed his name written in clean, careful script. His eyes flickered with curiosity. He assumed it was an opportunity, perhaps a commendation. His ego whispered, "You've finally earned his trust." He opened it, and the world went silent. Inside was his reflection, ugly, unfiltered, undeniable. A photograph of his mother's face, bruised, a recording of his own voice, coarse with venom, and a letter that dismantled his reputation with 10 quiet sentences. He didn't even finish reading it before his throat went dry. Mr. Kapoor was standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He turned slowly, expression unreadable. His voice, when he spoke, was soft. Too soft. "How long have you been this kind of man?" my son stammered. "Sir, I don't understand." "Don't lie to me," Kapoor cut in, his tone sharp now. "You hit your mother. You recorded yourself threatening her." He held up the USB drive. "You think I didn't listen?" My son tried to breathe, but the air refused to enter his lungs. He reached for excuses, stress, misunderstanding, family tension, but every word collapsed before it reached his tongue. Because what defense does a man have against his own voice? Kapoor didn't yell. He didn't need to. Authority wrapped itself around him like smoke. He stepped forward and said quietly, "You've been in this company 8 years. I saw you as family, but I will not keep a man who beats his mother." The words fell like stones. "Collect your things. Don't come back." And then, almost gently, "I'll make sure everyone knows why." He drove home in silence, windows up, air off, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the winter chill. Every red light mocked him. Every honk from behind felt like judgment. By the time he reached the house, he looked older, like the years had folded on him all at once. He stood in the doorway that evening, pale and hollow-eyed. I didn't look up immediately. I was cutting vegetables, the knife steady in my hand, the rhythm calm. He didn't speak, he just watched. "Finally," he said, voice cracking, "You did this." I didn't deny it. I simply said, "Eat, the food will get cold." He stared at me, searching for weakness, for fear. But I had none left to give. I was past fear. When a mother buries the illusion of her child's goodness, there is nothing left to mourn. He sat slowly, his movements mechanical. He picked up the spoon but didn't eat. His hands trembled slightly. "They fired me," he said at last. Do you understand what that means? My career, my name. Your name? I interrupted quietly, my eyes still on the cutting board. You should worry about your soul, not your name. He slammed his fist on the table, but there was no power in it now, only frustration. You've ruined me, he spat. I set the knife down and looked up for the first time. My voice was calm, almost kind. No, my son, you ruined yourself. I only told the truth. For a moment, I saw the child he used to be, lost, small, scared. Then the mask returned, pride patching over panic. He shoved the plate aside and stood up. You'll regret this, he muttered. You think they'll believe you over me? You're nobody. I smiled softly. And yet, that nobody brought down your world. He didn't answer. He walked out, slamming the door so hard the wall shook. I didn't move. The echo faded, and I was left with the soft tick of the clock and the faint smell of coriander and smoke. Later that night, his wife came. Her makeup was perfect, her perfume heavy, her smile brittle. What happened? She asked, sitting across from me. He came home and just shut down. I stirred the pot on the stove. He's thinking, I said simply. Some truths take time to digest. She frowned. Did you two fight again? I turned and met her eyes. No, I said. We've stopped fighting. One of us already lost. She didn't understand. Not yet. But she would, soon. Because ruin doesn't happen all at once. It unravels slowly. Job, reputation, marriage, pride, thread by thread, until a man is standing in the wreckage he built himself. That night, after she left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The stars were faint, hidden behind the city's light, but I could see one, a small flicker refusing to die. I smiled. He had wanted me invisible. He had wanted me quiet. Now the entire world could see him, and not for what he pretended to be, but for what he truly was. And in that quiet, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Rumors are faster than fire. By the second morning, whispers had reached every corridor of his office, even though he was no longer allowed inside. His name moved from mouth to mouth like a curse. He wasn't Mr. Arjun Mehra, senior financial advisor anymore. He was the man who hit his mother. The fall was swift and merciless. Corporate loyalty has limits, and compassion even less. No one dared defend him. The ones who once laughed at his jokes now avoided his gaze, crossing streets, ignoring calls, deleting photos from office gatherings. He had vanished from their world, and worse, they pretended he had never existed. He didn't return home for 3 days. When he finally did, he looked smaller. His hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, eyes red and hollow. He walked like the air itself was heavy. I was in the kitchen again, preparing lentils. Cooking had always been my rhythm, my calm. Each movement deliberate, soak, stir, simmer. He used to mock me for it once. Now he couldn't meet my eyes. They won't take me back, he said quietly, his voice hoarse. I went to the office today. Security stopped me, like I was a criminal. I didn't respond. The lentils bubbled softly, releasing a slow, earthy scent. He leaned against the counter, watching me, waiting for pity that would never come. You don't understand, he snapped when silence became unbearable. I have bills, a mortgage, responsibilities. And I had bruises, I interrupted softly. He flinched. I turned, wiped my hands on a towel, and faced him. You think I did this to destroy you? I said. But I did it so you could finally see yourself. All your life, you mistook obedience for love. You thought control was respect. I raised a son, not a tyrant. But you became one. His lip trembled just for a moment. A tiny crack in his armor. But he hid it quickly behind anger. You're enjoying this, he hissed. You wanted revenge. I shook my head slowly. Revenge is for equals, Arjun. You are my son. I wanted redemption. He didn't answer. He left again, slamming the door. I let him go. A man drowning in his own pride must first realize he's underwater. The wife came again 2 days later. This time, the mask had cracks. Her hair unbrushed, mascara smudged. She sat at the dining table, her hands shaking. He's changed, she said in a whisper. He doesn't sleep. He drinks. He screams in his sleep, sometimes about you, sometimes about a recording. I looked up, meeting her eyes. He dreams of his conscience, I said. It's been silent for too long. Tears welled in her eyes. He told me you're lying, that you faked it all. I smiled gently. Then tell him to take me to court. Let the world decide. She went silent, because she knew he wouldn't. He couldn't. He had no proof, no allies, no innocence to cling to. I poured her tea, placed the cup before her. The scent of cardamom filled the air. You love him, I said softly, but love can't fix what pride has broken. She nodded weakly. He won't talk to me anymore, she whispered. He just sits in the dark. I said nothing. There are wounds silence heals better than words. A week later, the calls began. His voice, trembling, desperate. First, apologies, then anger, then pleading. Please, Ma, help me. Just talk to Mr. Kapoor. Tell him I've changed. Tell him I was sick. I let the phone ring out. Then, when he came to the house, pounding on the door like a madman, I stayed behind it, silent, listening. You can't ignore me, he shouted. I'm your son. You owe me that. Oh. Even now, after everything, the word burned in his mouth. He still believed love was a debt to be collected, not a grace to be earned. When he finally stopped shouting, the silence that followed was deafening. Through the door, I could hear him sobbing quietly, the sound of a grown man who had forgotten how to cry. For the first time in years, my chest ached, not from fear, not from anger, but from a deep, weary sadness. A mother's heart doesn't stop beating just because her child turns cruel. It only learns to beat differently. The next morning, I found him asleep on the porch, head resting on the wooden steps, a bottle beside him. The rising sun painted his face gold, but his eyes looked gray, lifeless. I placed a blanket over him and went inside. That was mercy enough. By evening, his wife came again, holding an eviction notice in trembling hands. The bank, she whispered. They're taking the house. He stopped paying months ago. I nodded. He'll have to move back here then. Her eyes widened. You'd let him? I smiled faintly. Of course. This house was built by my husband's hands. I'm not the one who exiles family. She hesitated, then said quietly, You still love him. I didn't deny it. Love and forgiveness are not the same thing. One you give freely, the other you make them earn. That night, as rain whispered against the windows, he came home, truly home. No arrogance, no fury, just exhaustion. He didn't speak when I opened the door. He walked past me, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd once struck me. For a long time, we said nothing. Finally, he whispered, I've lost everything. I looked at him and said softly, Then perhaps now you can start to find yourself. And that was how the unraveling began. Not with punishment, but with understanding forced through pain. He had built a life on cruelty, and now he would learn what it meant to rebuild one on truth. But the story doesn't end with repentance, because not every man who falls learns how to rise. Some stay broken, some try to take others down with them, and I had a feeling my son wasn't done fighting fate yet. The days that followed were strangely quiet. He stayed inside the house, avoiding sunlight as if it would expose what he'd become. The man who once ruled conversations with arrogance now couldn't even look people in the eye. He barely ate. He slept in fits, waking drenched in sweat, muttering fragments of apologies that arrived too late. His wife stopped coming. Her phone number went silent. Perhaps she had found peace in distance, or maybe she was tired of being the last witness to his collapse. Either way, I didn't ask. Pain shared becomes poison. Sometimes silence is the only mercy left to give. It was on the 7th evening that he spoke again. I was sitting by the small shrine in the corner, lighting the oil lamp. The flame flickered weakly, just like him. He stood behind me, a shadow of the man I once knew. "They talk about me in the papers," he murmured. "Online, everywhere, the neighbors. They stare." I didn't turn around. "Let them. You fed their pride once. Now let them taste their gossip." He laughed softly, bitterly. "You sound like you enjoy it." "No," I said quietly. "I'm simply not afraid of truth anymore." That made him flinch. He walked to the table, sat down heavily. The sound of his body against the wood seemed to echo through the room. "Do you know what they called me?" he asked. "A coward, a hypocrite. They said I hide behind power to hit those who can't fight back." I turned to face him. Were they wrong? He looked at me with a kind of desperation that made him look like a child again. "I didn't mean, I lost control." I rose slowly, walked toward him, and placed the matchbox on the table. "Control isn't something you lose," I said softly. "It's something you surrender, one cruel choice at a time." That night, he drank again. The bottle clinked against the glass, the smell of whiskey thick in the air. Outside, the monsoon winds began to rise, rustling through the old mango trees. Rain fell, slow at first, then furious. I stood by the window, watching lightning split the sky. Behind me, his voice cracked through the storm. "Do you hate me, Ma?" The question hit deeper than I expected. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. They were red, tired, full of something that almost looked like regret. "No," I said. "I pity you." "That's worse," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You think you're pure. You're not. You destroyed me." "No," I said calmly. "I exposed you. There's a difference." "You could have forgiven me." I stepped closer. "And you could have stopped before you hit me, before you humiliated me, before you decided that love was a debt I owed you. Forgiveness isn't free, Arjun. It's earned." He slammed the glass down, shattering it. "I have nothing left to earn." I looked down at the shards glinting under the dim light. "Then you'll have to learn how to live with nothing." By dawn, the storm had passed. The power had gone out. The house smelled faintly of wet earth and ashes from the fallen lamp. I found him asleep at the table, face buried in his arms. He looked young again, vulnerable. For a moment, a dangerous tenderness stirred in me, the same old instinct to protect. But then I remembered the sting on my cheek, the sound of his voice when he commanded me to smile through my humiliation, and that softness turned to stone. I made breakfast anyway. Habits die harder than resentment. When he woke, I placed the plate before him without a word. He looked at the food, then at me. "Why are you still feeding me?" he asked. "Because hunger humbles," I said. "And I want you to remember what humility tastes like." He didn't touch the food. He pushed the plate away, stood, and stormed outside into the rain-soaked courtyard. From the window, I watched him pace, his movements erratic, his hair clinging to his forehead. He looked like a man fighting ghosts no one else could see. And maybe he was. By evening, a neighbor came to the gate. A kind man, older, with eyes full of quiet judgment. "Sister," he said softly, "I saw your boy down by the old store. He was shouting at the shopkeeper, lost his temper again." I sighed. The storm inside him hasn't passed. The neighbor nodded gravely. "Be careful. Anger without power is dangerous. It turns inward, or it looks for a weaker target." I knew he was right. That night, I locked my door. 2 days later, something inside the house began to break. Not objects, but peace itself. He would wake in the middle of the night, muttering, pacing, replaying arguments that no one else could hear. Sometimes he'd stand outside my door, whispering apologies through the wood. Other times, silence. Heavy, suffocating. The kind of silence that makes you listen for footsteps that never come. Then one night, I woke to smoke. The kitchen. Flames licking the edges of the counter, the curtains alight. He stood there, staring at it blankly, the bottle in his hand. "I didn't mean," he mumbled. "It just fell." I grabbed the bucket, doused the fire, coughing through the smoke. When the last ember died, I turned to him. He looked terrified, like a child caught doing something unspeakable. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "No," I said, my voice raw. "You're lost." He fell to his knees. "Help me, Ma." And for a second, I almost did. But something stopped me. The quiet realization that every time I saved him, I also allowed him to stay the same. So I walked past him, stepped into the rain, and let the storm cleanse what the fire couldn't. Behind me, the house smelled of smoke and burnt oil, a warning that not all flames destroy. Some just reveal what was already burning inside. 3 nights passed after the fire. The smoke had cleared, but the scent lingered in everything. Curtains, clothes, even the walls seemed to breathe out the memory of it. I cleaned in silence. I always did. But this time, I wasn't scrubbing the floor. I was erasing evidence of my hesitation. Because when I saw him kneeling in front of that small fire, terrified and broken, something in me still wanted to protect him, and I hated myself for that. He stayed out most of the day now. Rumor had it that the company had suspended him. The envelope had reached further than I intended. The board, the investors, even his wife's father. They called it moral misconduct. He called it ruin. I called it truth. He came home on the 4th night, drunk, rain dripping from his sleeves. The door slammed against the wall as he staggered inside. "You happy now?" he shouted. "You finally got what you wanted." I didn't answer. He laughed, sharp, cruel. "Of course you won't answer. You never do. You just stand there with your holy silence, pretending you're better than me." He took a step closer. The smell of whiskey hit me before his words did. "You destroyed me, Ma," he said. "You destroyed your own son." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." He slammed his hand against the table, sending the water jug flying. The glass shattered on the floor. "You think you're righteous? You're just old and bitter. You think hurting me gives you power?" I looked up at him, not as a mother this time, but as a witness. "No, Arjun, it gives me peace." That sentence stopped him. He stared at me like I was someone he'd never seen before. Maybe, in that moment, he realized he didn't know me at all. He started pacing, muttering to himself. Everyone left me. You, my wife, my boss. Even my friends won't take my calls. They whisper, they laugh. I can't show my face anywhere. Then maybe you should start by showing your soul to yourself, I said. He turned sharply. Don't preach to me. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. I do, I said, voice steady. I lost my son long before this. That hit harder than I expected. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, a battlefield of silence between us. And then he broke. He swept his arm across the table, sending everything crashing to the floor. Plates shattered, cups rolled. His rage filled the room like thunder. You wanted revenge! Is this enough? He screamed. You humiliated me! You humiliated yourself! I shouted back, my voice rising for the first time in years. It startled us both. He froze, his chest heaving, eyes glassy, trembling between guilt and fury. Then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. Quiet at first, then wild. You finally sound alive, he said. Too bad it's because you hate me. I don't hate you, I whispered. I mourn you. The rain outside grew violent again. Lightning flashed, painting his face in white bursts of fury. He grabbed the whiskey bottle, took a long swallow, then hurled it at the wall. It exploded, a spray of glass and liquor. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing hard, then turned toward me, slow, deliberate. I can't live like this, he said, his voice shaking. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. Then stop being one, I said. I tried. His voice cracked. But you took everything. You exposed me. You made me a ghost. You did that when you raised your hand to me, I said. The day you decided pain was power, you buried yourself. He stepped closer, eyes dark. You're not innocent either. You raised me. You made me like this. That one landed deep, deeper than I wanted it to, because some part of me wondered if it was true. Had my endless patience raised a tyrant? Had my love been too soft, my silence too long? But guilt is a luxury for the living, and I wasn't sure which of us that still applied to. He stood there, trembling, his breath ragged. Say something, he begged. Anything. I forgive you, I said. It wasn't mercy. It was a sentence. Because forgiveness, when undeserved, is heavier than any punishment. He broke down then, knees on the floor, face buried in his hands. The sound that left him wasn't crying. It was something deeper, the sound of a man finally hearing his own soul collapse. I watched him for a long moment. Then I turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? He called out. To sleep, I said. It's your turn to clean up the mess. That night, I dreamt of the day he was born, of the small hand that wrapped around my finger, of promises whispered between the cries. And when I woke, I realized that love can die quietly, not with screams or hatred, but with the simple, final breath of exhaustion. By morning, he was gone. His bed was empty, the house eerily still. But on the table, there was a letter, folded neatly beside an untouched cup of tea. I opened it with shaking hands. Ma, I'm sorry. You were right. I became everything you feared. I can't undo it, but maybe I can stop it from spreading. Tell them I went to the city. Tell them I'm starting over. Don't look for me. Don't forgive me again. Just remember the boy who used to hold your hand. Arjun. Tears fell, not from sorrow, but from release. He was gone, not lost this time, but finally trying to be found. Outside, the sun broke through the storm clouds. The air smelled of wet earth and redemption, and for the first time in years, I whispered his name, not as a curse, not as a plea, but as a prayer. Be free, my son, even if it's far from me. 6 years passed before I heard his name again. By then, the house no longer smelled of smoke or tears. The walls had been repainted twice, pale cream, like the color of morning fog. The neighbors knew me as Mrs. Mira, the quiet woman with the garden, and the young children in the lane would wave when I passed, their laughter a language I still understood. Peace had come slowly, like an old friend approaching from far away. But even peace has footsteps. That morning, I was pruning the roses when the postman called my name. "Letter for you, ma'am," he said, holding a brown envelope smudged with fingerprints and rain. The handwriting on the front stopped my breath. It was shaky, uneven, but unmistakable. Arjun Mira. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. The sunlight blurred. I stood there, the shears hanging loosely in my hand, as the memories came like smoke. The slap, the letter, the rain, the silence that followed. I took the envelope inside, sat at the same kitchen table where our last conversation had ended, and stared at it. It felt alive, like it was waiting to be opened, or perhaps waiting for me to forgive myself enough to do so. When I finally tore the seal, a faint scent of sea air and tobacco drifted out. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photograph came first. A small boy, maybe 5 or 6, standing by a fishing boat. Dark eyes, thick black hair, a crooked smile. The kind of smile I used to see in the mirror when Arjun was that age. I turned the photo over. Scrawled in his familiar hand were the words, "His name is Ayan. He loves the sea. He doesn't know what I used to be." My throat tightened. The letter beneath it was long, written in bursts of ink as though he had stopped often. Not to think, but to breathe. "Ma, I don't know how to begin this, so I'll just tell the truth. The way you taught me, even when I didn't listen. For years I hated you. Not because you ruined me, but because you showed me what I really was. After I left, I wandered from one job to another. I drank. I fought. I ran. And then, one night, in a port town, I met someone. She was selling fish at a stall. She had a scar across her wrist and eyes that looked like forgiveness. She didn't ask about my past. She just asked if I was hungry. I was. More than she knew. We married quietly. We built a small life. I became a fisherman, Ma. I wake at dawn. I mend nets. I smell of salt, not whiskey. When Ian was born, I held him and thought of you. I remembered the way you used to hum when I couldn't sleep. I remembered your hands, cracked from work, gentle even when tired. And I wept. You were right. Pain can teach or destroy. You let it teach you. I let it destroy me. But maybe now, maybe I'm learning too. I don't ask you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm trying to be the man you deserve to raise. If you ever want to meet your grandson, we live near the coast. The address is below. I understand if you never come. But if you do, the sea will tell me. It always does. Arjun. The paper trembled in my hands. For a long time, I couldn't move. The kettle hissed softly in the background. The roses swayed outside, and the letter sat like a heartbeat between my palms. I could have torn it up. I could have burned it. But instead, I folded it gently, placed it back in the envelope, and whispered, "The sea will tell you." 3 weeks later, I was standing on a bus to the coast. The journey was long. The roads uneven, but I didn't mind. I watched fields turn to forests, forests to small towns, and then finally to water, a horizon stretching endlessly, shimmering under the sun. When I stepped off the bus, the air tasted like salt and memory. I followed the address on the letter, a small blue house near the docks. The paint was peeling, but it was alive with noise, laughter, gulls, waves, life. And then I saw him. Older, thinner, but unmistakably him. He was mending a fishing net by the steps, sleeves rolled up, hair streaked with gray. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, that the years had made him a ghost. But then he looked up. His eyes widened. He dropped the net. "Ma?" I didn't speak. The word hung between us like a bridge neither of us had dared to rebuild. He took a step forward, then stopped, afraid, uncertain. "You came," he said finally, voice breaking. I nodded. "You wrote," I replied softly. He laughed, a choked, trembling sound, and before I could blink, he was hugging me. The same arms that had once hurt me were now shaking with apology. The scent of salt and tears mingled as he whispered, "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said, my voice barely a breath, "and I'm so proud." From inside the house, a child's voice called out, "Papa!" A small boy ran out, bare feet slapping against the steps. When he saw me, he froze, clutching a small wooden boat. "Who's that?" he asked, his eyes bright and curious. Arjun knelt beside him, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "That," he said softly, looking up at me, "is your grandmother." The boy grinned, wide, fearless. He ran to me without hesitation, holding out the boat. "You can hold it," he said proudly. "Papa made it." And in that moment, the past fell away, not erased, but forgiven by something pure and new. That night, we sat by the shore. The waves whispered against the sand. The boy slept nearby, curled under a thin blanket. "You look peaceful," I said quietly. "Maybe for the first time," Arjun replied. "I used to think I'd die a monster. But he nodded toward the boy. "He makes me want to live right." "You already are," I said. We sat in silence for a long while, watching the moon rise. And when he finally spoke again, his voice was small. "You ever think you could love me again?" I reached over, brushed a strand of gray hair from his forehead, and said, "I never stopped. I just waited until you learned how to deserve it." He bowed his head, tears glinting in the moonlight. When I left the next morning, he walked me to the bus. A yawn waved until the road curved away, and as the sea disappeared behind the hills, I realized something simple, something that took a lifetime to learn. Love does not die. It transforms. And sometimes it returns, not to heal what was broken, but to teach you that breaking was never the end. 15 years later, the sea still sang outside their window. The boy, no, the man now, stood where his father once stood, the same salt wind threading through his hair. Ian had grown into the quiet kind of strength, not loud, not sharp, but steady. He carried his father's eyes, but his grandmother's calm. That was what everyone said. Arjun had passed 2 years before. Heart failure, the doctor called it. But Ayan knew it wasn't just the heart. It was the years of guilt, the weight of silence, the penance that never quite left his shoulders. His father died with his hand in his, whispering one last thing before the light faded. Be kind, but never blind. Those were the last words Arjun Mira spoke, And now, Ian tried to live by them. He had taken over the small fishing business. Every morning, he woke before dawn, lit a small lamp for his father, and went to sea. Every evening, he wrote letters to his grandmother, even though she had long stopped writing back. She was old now, her hands weak, her mind slowly dimming. But Ian still sent them, once a month, without fail. Letters filled with small things: the color of the sea, the taste of mangoes, the sound of laughter from children playing on the docks. He didn't know if she ever read them, but that didn't matter. Writing them made him feel tethered to something larger, something sacred. Still, one truth had been hidden from him: the full story of who his father really was. Until the day the envelope arrived. It came with the morning tide, tucked under the door. No return address, no signature, just one line scrawled on the front in a trembling hand: "For when you're ready to understand." Inside was a bundle of old papers, yellowed, fragile, and photographs. A younger version of his father, in an office suit, standing beside a man he didn't recognize. Another of his grandmother, younger too, with eyes that looked both fierce and broken. At the bottom of the pile was a letter, unsigned, written in a script so neat it almost looked carved. "Ayan, you have lived your life hearing half the story. But truth has weight, and you deserve to carry it fully, not as rumor or shadow. Your father was not always the man you knew. Once, he was cruel to those he loved most. He hurt the woman who gave him life. He struck her, silenced her, made her small, until she decided to show him what silence really meant. She revealed him, not out of revenge, but out of justice. And that act, painful as it was, remade him. It sent him into the world stripped bare, but free to choose who he would become. He chose to be better. And in doing so, he redeemed not just himself, but you. Because without that breaking, there would have been no rebuilding. Without her pain, there would be no you. So when you think of your father, think of both, the man he was and the man he became. One cannot exist without the other. And when you think of me, remember, forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without letting the memory chain you. M. He read it twice, 3 times. The words sank into him like stones dropped into deep water. His father, violent. His grandmother, the one who smiled so gently, who sent him sweets wrapped in paper. He could hardly reconcile it. And yet, it made sense. The silences at home, the careful way his father treated his mother, the way he'd flinch at raised voices, how he'd never let anger linger for long. Ayan spent that night walking along the shore, barefoot, the sand cold under his feet. The tide rose and fell, whispering like an old story retold by generations. He thought about how pain reshapes people, how one act, one slap, one choice, one truth revealed, can ripple across decades. The next morning, he took the old papers and the letter to his grandmother. She was frail now, sitting by the window, a blanket over her knees, the scent of camphor and jasmine in the room. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, but there was confusion too, the kind that comes from too many years and too many memories. "Ayan," she murmured, "you've grown taller than your father." He knelt beside her, took her hand gently. "Nani," he said softly, "did you write this?" He held up the letter. Her eyes drifted to it, and something flickered there. Recognition, sorrow, peace. "I did," she whispered. "A long time ago, for the day you'd ask. Why tell me now?" "Because truth, my boy, is an inheritance too, but not every child is strong enough to carry it. You are." Was it true? All of it? She looked away toward the sea beyond the window. Yes. He hurt me. I hurt him back. But with words, not hands. I took his pride, not his life. And in doing so, I gave him a chance to be new. That is what love should be. Not endless tolerance, but the courage to stop the cycle. Did you forgive him? He asked quietly. Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. Every morning, and again every night. That night, Ayan dreamt of waves. He saw his father as a boy, reaching out for a hand he'd once slapped away. He saw his grandmother, standing at the edge of a storm, unmoving, unbroken. And he saw himself, between them, holding both their hands, bridging what time had torn. When he awoke, dawn had already painted the sky gold. He went to the docks, the same place where his father once stood, and whispered to the sea, I forgive you, Papa, and I forgive her too. The wind shifted, soft and warm, almost like an answer. The tide was low that morning, the sand still wet from last night's storm. Ayan stood barefoot, the hem of his pants damp, as his daughter chased small crabs along the shore, laughing with a voice that seemed to belong to sunlight itself. She was 7, curious, stubborn, alive in every way her grandfather once wasn't. He had named her Mira, not after his grandmother, but for what the name meant, the one who sees beyond illusion. He wanted her to grow knowing that truth, however sharp, is never her enemy. It had been 5 years since his grandmother's death. Ayan had buried her beside her son, the man she had both destroyed and redeemed. On her gravestone, he had carved a single line from her final letter. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without chains. He visited every year on her birthday, leaving a garland of marigolds and a single silver bangle. She had worn those bangles every day of his childhood. The soft chime of them still haunted him like a lullaby. His wife, Priya, didn't ask much about the past. She had come to know silence as a kind of sacred space, but she understood that when he stood at the graves, head bowed, lips still, he was speaking a language older than grief. That morning, the sea was calm, almost unnaturally so. "Papa!" Mira called, running toward him. "Look, a seashell that sounds like the wind." She held it out, her tiny hands trembling with excitement. He crouched, pressed the shell to her ear. "What do you hear?" "It's whispering," she said, eyes wide. He smiled. "That's the ocean remembering." "Remembering what?" "Everything," he said. "The things we say, the things we don't." She looked thoughtful for a moment, that same furrowed brow his grandmother once had. "Do you think the ocean forgives?" she asked. Ayan exhaled, looking at the horizon. The line between sea and sky shimmered like a secret. "Maybe it doesn't need to," he said finally. "Maybe remembering is its way of forgiving." Later that day, when they walked back home, he paused outside the old cottage. The paint was peeling now, the window frames rusted from salt. It had been his grandmother's house once, now his. The table she had sat at, the one where the plan had been born so many years ago, was still there. But the sharpness that once filled it, the weight of rage, of humiliation, was gone. The house was softer now, kinder. He set the seashell on the mantel, beside a framed photograph. His father, laughing with an ease that had come too late, holding him as a boy. And beside it, another, Mira, standing at the same shore, the sea stretching endlessly behind her. That evening, he sat by the window with his journal. He had started writing again after his grandmother's death, Not letters now, but reflections. Stories for Mira to one day read. He wrote, "My father taught me to build. My grandmother taught me to break. Both were lessons in love. To build without compassion is arrogance. To break without mercy is vengeance. But to do both with truth, that is justice." He closed the book gently. As the lamps flickered, Mira curled up beside him, sleepy and warm. "Tell me a story, Papa," she murmured. "What kind?" "One about your mama," she said, mispronouncing Nani, grandmother. He smiled softly. "Ah, that's not a bedtime story. That's a lifetime story." "Then tell me a small piece of it," she whispered. He thought for a long moment, then said quietly, "Once, there was a woman who forgot she was powerful. The world told her to be quiet, so she became silence itself. But one day, she remembered that silence can be a storm too, and she used that storm to save the world around her. Was she brave? Braver than most kings," he said. "Did she win?" "No," Ayan said, smiling faintly. "She became free. That's better." When Mira finally drifted to sleep, Ayan sat watching her, the rhythm of her breathing syncing with the slow hum of the sea outside. For the first time, he understood, truly, what his grandmother had meant by clarity. Forgiveness wasn't something you gave once. It was something you lived, over and over, until the memory stopped wounding you. He looked toward the waves through the open window and whispered into the wind. "It's done now, Nani. He's forgiven. You are too." And for a fleeting second, only a second, he could swear he heard the faint sound of bangles clinking in reply. Years later, when Mira grew older, she found her father's journal. She read about her grandmother, her father, and the man who had once struck her, the man who became better because he was broken. She closed the book, walked down to the same sea, and whispered, "I'll remember too." And the ocean, eternal witness that it was, whispered back,